Today I'm going to play with sandpaper. And sandpaper and paper makes perfect sense because we think of sandpaper and wood, and paper is made of wood. So I'm going to grab some sandpaper. This is 320 grit. It's an extra fine. The bigger the number gets, the finer your sandpaper is. So a 60 or 80 grit sandpaper is going to be very rough. I'm going to use this 320 because it is extra fine and it won't be damaging paper. When I'm doing things like decollage, I may use 60 or 80 or 100 grit sandpaper because I want to be more destructive. But practical reasons for using sandpaper. Sometimes you've got an image that's really glossy, and so we can just go over the image with a fine sandpaper, and we can dull down that glossiness a little bit. Not sure how well you can see that. We go both directions. The other thing that we're doing, you'll notice, is we're also dulling some of these colors. So sometimes you find an image, especially like in magazines, that's too vibrant. And so a little bit of sandpaper and it will dull down the color a bit and make it not so vibrant. And the sandpaper is going to work really well on glossy things like magazine pages, children's books. This book cover is very glossy. These pages are pretty glossy. I've got a fancy British design book that's got these glossy pages, so that's going to work really well for these glossy pages. And I'm going to show you a few different approaches of what we can do with the sandpaper. I'm going to take just a little bit of this. It's called sequin waste, and it's what's left over when they punch sequins. So a little bit of sequin waste, and I'm going to use that as a texture underneath a glossy magazine page. And I'm going to sand, and we're going to see how that works out. I like the effect that I get with the sandpaper with darker colors like this blue, because what the sandpaper does is remove some of the ink and reveal the white paper behind it. So that's kind of a fun way to add a pattern or something just by using something that has some texture underneath it. So we can do things like go over a stencil with our sandpaper, and I'm doing this very lightly. If that's not revealing enough, I can go back over it however long I want to do this. It's also very messy. You'll see the ink is gathering in there, and if I rub my finger over it, there's a lot of ink dust. But that's over a stencil, so that's a great way to add some pattern to just a plain magazine page. Like I said, I like these darker images. The other thing that the sandpaper does for us, this is a photo that someone took in the magazine, and maybe I want to obscure the photo a bit. This is corrugated paper. You can use a corrugated cardboard box if you want, and I'm going to sand over it, and I get those fun lines. And it also starts to obscure the image a little bit. So add some lines, add some texture, and then if I turn the corrugated and continue, I'm going to get some diagonal lines. Starts to look like cross hatching, and I'm also obscuring this original image a little bit. So if I turn that one more quarter turn, get even more pattern on this plain magazine page. So, you know, 3 different ways to look at one image from a magazine. Other things we can use things like fabric, like burlap, that have texture. I'll go ahead and grab one of these pages out of a design book that are kind of glossy, fancy pages. And I'm just going to put this right over some burlap. And again, with the sandpaper, lightly. You see how that's almost like it's adding beams of light or something in there, because it's taking the ink and sanding it off of the white paper underneath. So there are a variety of things you can use. These are texture plates. You can buy these in an art supply store. This is a book cover, and so you can see the ink is on the cover. It's about cardstock thickness. Might have to go a little bit heavier handed on this to get my pattern. This isn't a real clear pattern, but you can see a bit of this spiral on this book page. The other cool thing about sandpaper, you know, with something like this, is it ages the paper. So just a little bit of sanding, and you can, you know, knock down that color, and it's going to appear a little bit more aged. So those are different ways to add texture. I'm going to take this children's book. Let's see. This is kind of fun. On the back part of it, it's a very glossy cover. And that also, because it's a children's book, probably means it's got a layer of plastic over it. So I'm just going to dull it down. And so it's not going to be so shiny. And also, if I go to glue other things to this, it's not going to be as slick. So those are just a couple of different ways you can approach sandpaper. I'm going to grab some more out of the magazine here. I really like working on, like I said, a dark background or a black background. And I'm going to do another bit with the texture plate. Add some circles here. So see, I can really start obscuring her face. Now, if I'm a little too heavy-handed, I'm actually going to go through the paper. Maybe I want to obscure her face a little bit more, so just regular sanding. almost make her look like a ghost. And before you start gluing or using this in, collage or artwork, you do want to make sure you wipe off all of that sanding dust. See how messy it gets. Another thing we can do is, we've got an old photo here. Let me see. So I've got an old photo, and these are kind of glossy. We can, first of all, we can make it look older by making it look like it, got folded and refolded. And so I'm going to fold it, and then I'm going to sand along the edge. Sand that off, and just a little bit more. So it's a way to make something look dog-eared. Another thing we can sand is along the edges a little bit. And what I'm doing in that case is I'm taking some of that gloss off of the edge, and it's going to make the paper, the photo paper, accept ink a little bit better. So if I wanted to put some ink around the edges, it's going to take it better there on that edge that I sanded than it would on an edge that hasn't been sanded. And you can do that with any kind of paper. So if I take my, let's see here, just for a sample, I'm going to sand on this edge. If it's thicker paper, you can actually sand right on the actual edge. And then when I go to apply some ink, there's more for the ink to grab onto. So now I've got a few different sandy pieces here. I'm going to go ahead and put them together in a little collage for today. Get rid of all the other stuff. And I'm going to work on a 5" by 5" piece of cold press watercolor paper. Just making a little mini collage. Got my glue stick, and see what I like here out of these pieces. Really like that image, and so I think I might even just tear that a little bit. And then cut that, glue it down. And I like my blue circles. I'll just, let's see, go ahead and tear that right about there. Little snip. Glue that part down. Let's see if there's anything else I really like here. I like this. Maybe I'll tear a bit of this away. And I think I will just put a little bit of ink on that torn edge, just so it looks a little more worn. Glue that down. Okay, and there I have just a very simple little, let me trim this last little bit, simple little mini collage showing some different ways that I can use sandpaper.